Welcome to Vintage Reviews. I am George, and today we're gonna talk about A Fly from 1958. This one was directed by Kurt Newman, and it stars Al Hedison, Patricia Owens, and one of my all-time favorites, Vincent Price. So let's dig a little bit into the plot. This is about a man named Andre Delambriz, played by Hedison, and he's married to his wife Helena, played by Patricia Owens, and they are like the perfect family from the 1950s. They have a little boy, and they're very happy, and they live perfect life, and they're that kind of family. As the story begins, though, Andre has been crushed to death in a hydraulic press, and it turns out that his wife Helena is the one who did it. So then from that point on, Helena recounts the events of the last few months to Andre's brother, Francois, played by Vincent Price, and a police inspector. And it's from this point on that we see everything kind of in flashback, where Helena explains how they got to this point where Andre was crushed to death. So what we find out is that Andre was a scientist, and he was working on an experimental teleportation device. And this is the idea of transporting an object from one location to another by breaking its atoms down and then reassembling it. Sort of like the beaming in Star Trek. He was working on something like that. As the story progresses, we find out that the system has some glitches. He's able to teleport inanimate objects okay, but when he tries to do something that's living, it doesn't work out so well. So he thinks that he worked out all the bugs, and what he decides to do is that he's going to use himself as sort of a guinea pig. And how this works is he has this booth, and he goes into that, and he transports himself into another booth on the other side of his lab. So it's not like he's transporting across the country or anything. He's just doing it in his lab in his basement. So he thinks he's pretty safe, and he's figured it out. So he goes into this booth one day, transports himself to the other one, but there's a problem. A fly got into the booth with him. And when he transports himself to the other booth, what happens is his atoms get fused with the fly. And when he comes out, it's not a good thing. He ends up having the head of a fly and an arm of a fly, and his human head and his human arm are fused onto the fly. And the fly flies away, and now he's kind of in trouble because he's got a fly head and a fly arm, and unless he gets that other fly back that's got his head and his arm, and they go through the transporter again and hopefully get reassembled back to normal, that's the only hope he's got. And so he goes to his wife Helena, and he can't talk because he's got a fly head, but he's able to communicate with writing and that sort of thing. And she has to go out with her son and try to find this other fly that's got his human head and catch it. And that's the only hope they have of him coming back to normal. And that's pretty frightening a thing, I think. And that's the main plot of the story. I won't say too much more than that. But you get the idea. It's probably not going to turn out very well for him. So I'd like to get into a few trivia items if I could. For one thing, this was director Kurt Newman's biggest box office hit of his career. But the sad thing about that is he didn't live to see it. He died a month after this premiered and a week before it premiered in a large venue. So unfortunately, he never got to see the biggest success of his career come to fruition because he didn't live to see it. That's too bad. Another interesting thing is the actor Michael Rennie, who is known as Klaatu in the movie The Day the Earth Stood Still. He was originally offered the role of Andre, and he turned it down because a big chunk of that time on screen is spent with his head covered. And he didn't want to have his head covered up, so Michael Rennie didn't take the role. And, well, we could have had Klaatu, but that's okay. I think that Hedison did a pretty good job in the movie. So another interesting thing is that Patricia Owens had a real fear of insects. So the director, Kurt Newman, decided to use this, and he didn't let her see the head of the fly until the big reveal happens so that he could get an authentic scare out of her. Okay, so why do I like this film? Why did I choose to cover it today? Well, for one thing, I feel that it is a staple sci-fi film. It is one of those movies that just set up a lot of things that we see in science fiction today, and it just is infused pop culture, and I think it's an important movie to note for that reason. It's been parodied in The Simpsons. It had a remake in the 1980s that David Cronenberg did. It's a really good remake, and I recommend that too. And like I said, it's just a influential film in pop culture. Things like the transportation. Think of, like I said before, Star Trek and the beaming. I got to think that Gene Roddenberry was influenced by this because this came first. And so again, this has a very influential story and elements that we see in sci-fi today. And this was one of those movies that brought us that. Also, it is just a good movie. It has all the elements that I enjoy. The idea of your body being fused with a fly, and then the fly scannering away, and your only hope to get back to normal is if somebody can track down this one fly out of hundreds and bring it back to you so that you can hopefully go through this machine again and become whole again, and that's your only salvation. That's some frightening stuff, and I enjoy that a lot. And another thing is that ending. The ending of this movie has an iconic moment. If you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to spoil it in case you've never seen this film. I want you to experience it. But there is a moment toward the end of the film that is just crazy. I remember it when I was a kid, and it's always been one of those moments that I just remember ever since. And I won't spoil it because I want you to see it. But if you've seen it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So how about you? Have you seen The Fly? Is it one that you like? Do you have any thoughts on it? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. And thanks again for tuning in. I really appreciate you taking the time. And until the next time, have a good one.